All right, good morning. So my name is Matthew Arnow. I'm VP of Enterprise Solutions at a company called Tidelift. Has anybody heard of Tidelift before this event? You said you had one of these shirts, right?
Mine's light blue.
Oh, like Luke. Luke's got one on back there.
Yes.
You were supposed to wear it today. He does pay the maintainers, though, I'm sure, some way, right? Today, I'm going to talk about a specific hack that just happened maybe 3 or 4 months ago called XZ utils. We're going to highlight not only the dangers of open source burnout, but things that you can do as a company, as individuals, to help kind of sustain open source. Just by a show of hands, are folks familiar with XZ utils? Okay, about half I'd say are. We'll dive into it if you're not familiar. And I'm curious after the talk, like the people who know about XZ, I'm curious, if you know the whole story of XZ or if it was just a backdoor, because there's kind of 2 parts to this story, as we'll discuss in today's session. So first, I'm going to let your imagination work here. This is Bob. Okay? Imagine Bob. He's your airport security screening repair guy at your local airport. He's stressed out, if you can't tell, because the screening machine has broken down yet once again. Now, unfortunately, nothing can be done because, as it turns out, Bob is an unpaid volunteer. Bob has a full-time day job repairing computers at Best Buy, so he can only work on the security screening nights, weekends, and then, of course, when it's not soccer season, because he coaches his soccer team for his daughter. So no one's getting screened, no one's flying anywhere until Bob's soccer practice is over. Could you help with the notes, please? Thank you. So he's just laughing. So this sounds crazy to you, right? It's crazy? Yeah, okay. Just want to make sure. Well, as it turns out, this is exactly what we come to accept as the norm for open source software that's built into all of our applications. Our global infrastructure, used by the largest corporations, generates billions of dollars of wealth, is built on the backs of these unpaid labor. And just like Bob, our pretend volunteer security screening repair guy, they're charged with making sure critical systems that you rely on don't fail. But they can only do it at nights, weekends, after soccer practice, and only when it's convenient for them. So many of them are unpaid who got into open source because coding is fun, and it is. But perhaps some of their success of their projects, the thrill of it, when it first starts taking off is really exciting, right? There's people, talking about their work online, but then all of a sudden, things start flooding in, right? PRs, hey, could you fix this? Could you add that? And all of a sudden, this fun day at the beach, all of a sudden the day at the beach turns into a nightmare. So, these are the things that our unpaid labor is dealing with, just like Bob from the security screening center. So it's enough to ask yourself, how did we get here to begin with? So over the past 25 years, as a lot of you are probably familiar, open source has kind of gone from a niche, kind of niche way to build software, right? Microsoft's never going to embrace open source, they bought GitHub, to the de facto way that software is being used. And businesses are bringing it in because of a variety of reasons, mostly because they have access to billions of lines of code for free, and they help kind of build that foundational aspect of your code. One study, in fact, found out that 98% of commercial open source software contains open source software. So again, this has become the standard in building with open source. And it's really become, in our opinion, and probably yours as well, a global public good. It's a piece of irreplaceable infrastructure that's typically mentioned in the same sentence as, let's say, clean water, dependable electric power, safe highways, and even, yes, airport security. There was a recent, within the last 3 or 4 months again, Harvard Business Review. I don't know if anybody's seen this paper, but there's an estimated demand side value of open source software that they claim it's up to $9 trillion in GDP. Now, by comparison, the U.S. interstate highway is valued at $742 billion, and the U.S. electrical grid is estimated to have the value of 1.5 to 2 trillion. So that's why this is so interesting, this topic of open source. But it's not only interesting, it's kind of frightening at the same time because, again, we're relying on these unpaid maintainers. So, again, this is in your, I can guarantee you probably all of your code. It's in our government's code. It's even in our weapons systems, if you could believe it or not. And again, this community is at risk. So I mention all that as really a backdrop to what happened with XZ. So it sounded like a lot of you folks were familiar with it, but just for those who aren't familiar with XZ, XZ utils is a commonly used open source data compression tool in the Linux kernel. This particular hack was elaborate and really devious in nature, as it was a social engineer hack that took years to carry out. It involved multiple fake aliases and preyed upon, yes, of course, the overworked, unpaid open source maintainer. Now, one of those fake aliases, which went by the name of Jiatan, built trust with the open source maintainer Collins by contributing useful code over multiple years. So he kind of set himself up as a trusted advisor or trusted person in the ecosystem. However, the hack was discovered almost by accident by a Microsoft engineer who just happened to notice that some of his code was running slowly and then tracked the issue back to XZ. So as I mentioned, this was a social engineering hack. And I have, this is actually a screenshot from June 2022. And I'm just going to read some of this where you could see the fake alias Jigar Kumar writes a note to another fake alias badgering Collins, and he says, "Progress will not happen until there is a new maintainer. The current maintainer lost interest and doesn't care to maintain it anymore. It's sad to see for a repo like this." And so then Collins, the person who's been maintaining this for a number of years, says, "I haven't lost interest in my ability to care. However, it's been limited mostly due to long-term mental health care issues. Recently, I've worked off list a bit with Jiatan on on XZ, and perhaps will have a bigger role in the future." And this is important. It's also good to keep in mind that this is an unpaid hobby project. So these comments kind of set up the backdrop again for this social engineering hack that took years to carry out. So today, I want to show you that the risks caused by underpaid, overworked open source maintainers are not just isolated to incidents like XZ. If you care about open source and want to see it healthy and secure for a long period to come, you need to understand more about the experience of what the open source maintainers are dealing with. And as it turns out, just today, we released our third annual open source maintainer report. So you all are some of the first people to hear some of the stats, and we have some one-pagers back there Luke's got for y'all, and there's a QR code here to download the full report. But this just came out today. This is our third one. So I'm going to go through some of the stats. And what we do is we survey 400 open source maintainers globally to collect this data. We believe it's the largest open source maintainer survey that's been done. So let's see. So by show of hands, before we get into some of the results, what percentage of maintainers do you think are not getting paid for their work today? Not getting paid. 10%? 20? 40? We got a 40. Oh, we got a higher 60? We got some 60s, okay. 80? All right. All right, well, 60 was the right answer. So we're not in that bad a shape. We're making some progress because this is a topic that people have been talking about for the last few years. Certainly Log4j helped initiate some of the investments across the world, but it's not enough. So yeah, 60% of the maintainers consider themselves unpaid hobbyists. Only 12% make all of their income from maintaining their projects. So imagine that, only 12% of the entire amount of open source are getting considered full-time. And then 24% consider themselves semi-professionals who earn some income either through their work or through other means. And I guess what I want you to take away from this stat is that things like XZ are not, it's the norm, not the exception, right? So this isn't like a one-off thing. This is actually pretty normal, unfortunately, in the open source ecosystem. So we asked in this survey and multiple years in a row, what do they dislike most about their work? And the blue bars here represent this year's data, and the gray bars are the previous years. So you can see, unfortunately, it's pretty consistent over time. There's efforts like Tidelift and others that are trying to make differences, but we need more help. We need more discussions in the marketplace about this. So to dig in a little bit on the data, there's three top things that maintainers identified as most disliking about their volunteer work. One, as you can imagine, it's just not being financially compensated, right? The second one is forget about the compensation, that's one piece, but just feeling underappreciated, right? Like a lot of times when we talk to open source maintainers, they're getting like nasty PRs and people kind of like, treating them like customer service, and they're not their vendor, right? They're just a person on the internet who put up some code and they decided to incorporate it. And the third one is that it adds to their personal stress. So just imagine you, like Bob, the security screener, just having to go fix repair equipment for free, right? It wouldn't feel very good. So they're also concerned about trying to comply with some of the new security frameworks that are out there. So like NIST, Secure Software Development Framework, right? You all are probably familiar with it within your businesses. And it turns out we should also have the open source maintainers care about that, but there's no incentive for them, and they kind of get a little anxiety about thinking about some of these things. In Europe, there was a bill called the CRA. I don't know if anybody's followed that. It luckily kind of got killed, but there was some real concern that the European Union would enforce more, kind of weight on their shoulders, opposed to the people who decided to bring in their open source. So what's the impact? Well, we asked maintainers also, so you're not getting paid, you're not getting recognized. What does that mean for you? 60% of the maintainers that we surveyed reported that they've considered quitting or have quit their work. So that's a really scary number, right? 60% of your packages, like somebody could just delete it tomorrow. That would have a huge impact on your software supply chain. So when you think about open source projects you rely on, how would you deal with that, right? Like if you wake up next morning and somebody deleted 10 JavaScript libraries or 10 Python libraries, what would that effect be for your kind of software supply chain? And are you responsible for those security fixes? Are you going to your security team? Like how do you handle that? I bet those discussions haven't always taken place. So our friend Forrest Brazil did a nice job of highlighting this in a cartoon that we commissioned earlier this year. Maybe you saw it on LinkedIn. It kind of went quote unquote viral in the open source world. So as you can see at the beginning, right, there's this motivation. They they have this idea. They're talking to their friends. They're talking to their company, and they start working on it. And as it turns out, it takes off, right? They start. People start using it, it takes off, and they're getting stars on their GitHub, and that's really exciting. But then they hit the reality, right? What we call the burnout zone. And that's really the disconnect, right? The crazy thing is when an open source project starts taking off, this is when the maintainer is starting to feel more pressure, right? They're not getting paid, their workload's increasing, and there's really no additional benefit for them other than responding to PRs. So it's no wonder that 60% have considered quitting once their projects kind of start taking off. Meanwhile, another scary stat is, and this is, so if you look at the blue here, that's this year's survey, and the other dotted lines are ones from the past. This is the age range of maintainers. So the other scary thing is we're not seeing new maintainers kind of coming into the ecosystem. The existing open source maintainers are getting a bit older, and we're not seeing as many new open source maintainers coming in to the network, if you will, right? And so that has another impact on your business if you are building on open source, on the legs of open source. That's a real concern, if this stops, kind of working the way it's worked for the last 20 years. So we've also asked maintainers, how long have they been doing this work? And we found similar concerning data, right? 45% of them have been doing this work for 10 years. So that was kind of the early days of open source, if you will. 24% of them have been maintaining projects for 6 to 10 years, but only 9% of maintainers have been doing it for less than 2 years. So again, if your organization's using open source heavily, you have to ask yourself beyond the question of what is the risk to maintainers that I rely on quitting. You also have to ask, if they're not quitting, are they being replaced by a new generation of open source maintainers, and what your organization can do to make sure that there's continued investment and continuous sustainability for this open source ecosystem. So my story about Bob that I mentioned a couple times, that was actually inspired by this report from the Ford Foundation called The Roads and Bridges the unseen labor behind our digital infrastructure. And this report came out about 8 years ago. In it, the author uses the metaphor of public infrastructure as roads and bridges and airports to make the case that open source infrastructure must be invested in the same way that our other public good infrastructure has been invested over years, right? Highways and bridges and such. When the author released this report in 2016, they meant it as a warning. And this paragraph on the cover page, I'm going to read it here, really kind of summarizes it. So I'll just read the challenge, right? Free, publicly available source code is the infrastructure on which all digital society relies. It is vital to the functioning of governments, private companies, and individual lives. However, few realize that public code is built and maintained almost exclusively by unpaid volunteers, and the enormous amount of work required is in desperate need of institutional support. Without effective support for coders, work on publicly available projects, not only will their labor go uncompensated, but the digital world's risk security breaches, interruptions of service, and slowed innovation. And so here we are, that was 8 years ago, and we've made some progress here in 2024, but there's still more work to be done. So what can I do about this, right? If you're worried about open source software and it might not be around in a few years, is there anything you can do as an individual? Is there anything your organizations can do? So in short, one idea is actually to pay the maintainers. Who knew, right? But this was actually risque, right? When we started Tidelift, like a lot of folks were like, open source maintainers don't want money. But it turns out they do. They need to survive and they need incentive as well. But the question is, it's not always clear how to pay maintainers or what to pay them for. So I'm going to go through some of the data to share some ideas of how you can engage with open source maintainers in a financial way as well. And this is a breakdown of some of the things that we learned from our survey this year. So the headline here is that the primary source of maintainer income are actually through donation programs. And donation programs are great when donations are coming in. But as you all know, probably from donating yourself to different causes, when the economy's good, you're donating. When the economy's bad, you're not donating, right? And so open source, that's not great, right? They need consistent revenue. The second place that is a source of funding is actually through salaries and wages from employers. So some employers have been hired over time to work on specific open source projects for their organizations, and that's great. A third way is through companies like Tidelift, where we pay the maintainers to actually follow specific secure software development practices and really commit on a contract to keep going with their projects, right? It's really kind of professionalizing their work. So none of these, what's crazy is none of these sources were identified by more than a fourth of the maintainers that we surveyed. So only a fourth of the maintainers that we surveyed are even getting any of these compensation methods. And if you were under the impression that someone else is paying for the maintainers and you don't have to, then hopefully these stats kind of set that straight for you. So what we found is companies paying maintainers, it's only 5% of maintainers are getting directly compensated from the companies they work with. Only 3% are getting paid from the foundations. So a lot of companies say, oh, we're working with, I don't want to mention any specific foundations, but we're giving money to this foundation, that foundation. It turns out a lot of that money is going to conferences and to research papers, and that's all important stuff, but it's not going down to the maintainers, only 3%, and that's pretty shocking. And again, what's the role of government, right? Like government's paying for like a lot of other public things that we use. Open source is one of them. It turns out only 1% of maintainer pay is coming from governments. And there are some efforts within government, certainly in the US as well, to pay maintainers, but it's few and far between. The last data point here is if you think back to the roads and bridges report, a lot of the public infrastructure is paid, again, by government money. Perhaps we should think about ways for us to talk to our government about paying for open source software just the same as they do for other things. There is efforts internationally to do this. Switzerland, for example, they just made a law where all applications that the government is working on, they have to open source. So we're starting to see governments getting more and more involved in open source. Here in the US, there's CMS, the Center for Medicare, they have their first open source program office that was open this year. And that's kind of like the initial model that we anticipate seeing other agencies following. So hopefully we'll start seeing more investment through these different organizations. And the other thing I want to say is it's not just about payment, right? We talked about recognition. So that's the other thing that we saw from our survey this year is that when we ask maintainers about getting paid, it's not always just about payment, right? It's also about the recognition, where something goes wrong. And Log4j, I think everybody knows about that story, right? This is a great example of nobody knew really what Log4j was, nobody really cared until Log4j happened. And those maintainers, they started getting an influx of donations, which was great for that time. But now that it's not a headline anymore, those donations have essentially evaporated, right? And so it's one of those things where there's a huge swell of interest, things get fixed, and then we all go back to the thing that we need to focus on that day until the next one happens. And that's where we think that the recurring revenue stream, just like all your businesses are built upon, needs to be applied to the open source community as well. And this is the maintainer, one of the maintainers of Log4j. His name's Gary Gregory. And as you can see, he said, I think the recurring income piece is critical for me at least. Just imagine what it's like to have a job with recurring income. It makes you feel safe, secure, and confident that you keep on going with this work and it's not wasted time. It also lets you plan ahead. So that's one of the maintainers from the Log4j incident. So you're probably here thinking, damn, well, this really sucks, right? So many people aren't getting paid. I doubt many of you are thinking, suckers, we're using all your code for free. And maybe some of you are. But in my experience, I've talked to a lot of people about this over the past 5 years that I've been in this space of open source. And most people would like to see more of a world like this, right? Where organizations get more trust, more health and security of the open source that they rely on. And then the maintainers, they're getting recognized, they're getting compensation, they're getting the value back that they've created for organizations. So there's a lot of data in this report. Again, we'll give you a copy of some of the top stats we've seen, and you can feel free to download the full version through the QR code here. But what I wanted to call attention to on this here is that when we did poll maintainers that are getting paid, 55% are more likely to actually align to certain security parameters, 55%. So again, this is where if we engage with the open source maintainers, we recognize their work, we compensate them, they are willing to do the work, but we just need to make sure that they're in the, they have the same incentives as we do as businesses. So switching gears a little bit, let's talk about code review. Who here has a code review process within their organizations? Okay, pretty much everybody. Well, it turns out that unpaid open source maintainers, only 27% of them are actually doing a code review process. One, because a lot of these projects, they don't have resources to bring in more people, right? They have no compensation coming to them. They can't find enough people to help them with their hobby projects. So there's essentially nobody else to do a peer review. The good news is, again, 53% of the people that are paid are doing code review. So the light at the end of the tunnel is that we can change the direction of code review process within open source. Again, we just need to find out better models for them to be incentivized to do it. Another example is half of the unpaid maintainers that have a only less than half of the unpaid maintainers have a security disclosure plan. But 2/3 of them, 66%, have a vulnerability disclosure plan if they are being compensated. So in closing, I want to tell you just a few stories of the kind of things that happen when we do pay maintainers. So the first one is well, let me ask, is anybody familiar with the package Minimist? Anybody know that they rely on that one? Oh, we got one. I've heard of it. Perfect. We'll take it. So every single team that I've talked to has had an issue where they've had to untangle a mess in their open source code because of a deleted package or somebody just stopped maintaining it. So this is a kind of a wild story of one of our partner maintainers, Jordan Harbrand, who really saved Minimus from being deleted altogether. So a while back, and some of you may recall this, NPM, one of the package managers, they made a change to their requirements to maintainers, where they required the top maintainers of packages to put on two-factor authentication, and that was meant as a security, something that's good for security. However, again, because the maintainers aren't being compensated, a lot of them were a little, shook off by this, right? They were a little like, you can't tell me what to do. I'm not getting compensated. And one of these maintainers, this was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back for him, right? He actually, unusual lifestyle, but he doesn't have a mobile phone. So putting 2FA on his NPM package was a real burden for him. And Jordan, who relies on some of these packages of Minimus, he was chatting with him online and heard him kind of saying that he may delete them. So at this point, Jordan got really concerned because he relies on these within his transitive dependencies. And he said, hey, could I take over those packages? And he was already a maintainer with Tidelift. And so what happened was he tried to work with the maintainer, Substack was his name, to transfer all of the packages. But it turns out there's not like a easy button on GitHub to just transfer all of them over. And so by the time Substack and Jordan were trying to work together, Substack just deleted them. And Jordan I remember talking to him, he just saw them deleting one by one until they were all gone. And he tried to recover them, he tried to do some backup stuff, but he just couldn't. What he did at that point is he did reach out to GitHub, he reached out to Tidelift, and we were able to work with Jordan, and we were able to work with GitHub to actually get those packages reinstated on GitHub and transferred over to Jordan. So the good news is now those packages have a home. Jordan's getting compensated for their work, and because he's getting compensated, he is also able to bring in a second person. So now these packages are getting code review, second code review. They're getting the care and feeding. They're aligning to certain standards that we require of Jordan being on contract for getting that recurring revenue. So he really saved the day, and these are the types of things that you don't hear about because nothing happened, right? Luckily, some people kind of saw what could happen in the supply chain and made some changes so it wouldn't affect you. But if Jordan didn't step in, if Jordan didn't know about these things, this could have had an impact on all of your applications potentially. Another scenario is in Jackson Databind. Is anybody using this package? Anybody familiar with Jackson Databind? Okay, a few more working on this. So this is another one that if you've been using Jackson Databind, it's actually had a lot of vulnerabilities over the years, like an insane amount, right? But again, unpaid hobby project. What we were able to do is actually work hand in hand with Jackson Databind and really help him re-architect the entire thing. So if you've noticed over the last year and a half, 2 years, there hasn't been as many CVEs within that project. And that's partly because of the work that we're able to do directly with Tatu and making sure that he's getting compensated, that he has some reasons to re-architect his stuff more than just getting PR requests and getting yelled at by folks on GitHub. So if you want to explore this subject a little bit further, again, I'll be here, Luke in the back's here. We both have Pay the Maintainer shirts on. We got some socks for you as well if you want to see us. But there are some things that you can do as an organization, and I'll give you some things that you can bring back to your businesses. So one is asking the question, is there a master list of all the open source in use today, right? Essentially the inventory. Some people are calling it a software bill of material, an SBOM. The other thing you can ask is how many packages that you're relying on have been declared end of life or abandoned, right? A lot of folks in the world of open source, they look at the CVE as the kind of de facto standard of is a package good, is a package bad? Maybe they look at GitHub stars, but it's really critical right now to look at, is there a community behind these projects? Is it end of life? Is there a different version I should be using, right? Folks that lost their Christmas and New Year's because of the Log4j incident, they were many, many, many versions behind on Log4j. The folks that were up to date on Log4j, it was a quick, easy fix, and they got back to their holidays. So keeping up to date and making sure that you're not using end-of-life packages is really critical. but you wouldn't believe how many businesses aren't asking that question today. Another one you could ask is, do you know how many maintainers of the packages are unpaid volunteers, right? That's another great indicator of there may not be an issue today, but if there's an issue tomorrow, what does that mean for you, right? Are you left forking a project? Do you need to re-architect your things? Knowing that there's a community behind those projects that is active and being compensated would make better decisions for your team. The last is, if we had to start writing our own code, right? So let's say somebody does delete their thing. What does that mean for you tomorrow, right? Do you have to patch it? Do you have to all of a sudden create, a new open source project yourself to put out there? What does the extra workload and burden mean for your teams? So for more inspiration, I'm going to close here with something that one of our co-founders, Luis Villa, wrote in a blog recently. In our experience, open source maintainers often start projects for non-monetary reasons, like the classic scratching an itch or because their bosses tell them to do so. But after starting projects for various reasons, they often maintain projects out of a sense of obligation, at least until the burden becomes too much and they burn out and quit. To put it another way, no maintainers started their project because of the love of ensuring it complies with your company's definition of enterprise secure software development practices for no pay for the rest of their lives. If your company needs this level of secure practices, 2FA vulnerability fixes that you require of the code of your in-house development teams, you are leaving the realm of software downloaded for free off the internet and entering into the realm of economic transaction offering value of income in return. So if it's not evident by now, Luke, our company, we're very passionate about paying the maintainers for their work. I do want to make sure you understand we believe that open source is incredible, and we can't take it for granted, right? That's why we're here, right? We just want to make sure that we're leaving a community that's alive and healthy and thriving, and give it the care and feeding like any living thing needs. We can't assume that someone else is doing this for us. We need to take responsibility for the health and the open source we all depend on. So if you found this interesting, you want to talk more, again, find me, find Luke. We're going to be here all day. And thanks for listening in. Appreciate it.